All right, thanks for joining us on this video. We're going to talk about something you might have heard of thus far, but it's CBSAs, MSAs, CSAs, MUSAs, lots of acronyms. I've got Kurt Kincher from our side here to talk about this. Um, Kurt, let's just jump in with just a high-level kind of view of what exactly these are. I think most people will be familiar with MSAs, and then we can kind of jump into how we use them. But just give us a high-level view. What are these?
Sure. Yeah. So MSA is, what we've offered forever. Essentially major markets, right? So if you wanted to do marketing and targeting a particular market, say Denver Metro or Los Angeles or New York City, it's just an easier way to group those geographies better for targeting or for analysis. You don't need to know all the individual cities that make those up. New York is a great example. If you were to use state, you'd have to use 3 states, and that would pull in, upstate New York, and it's not really what you intended. So it's really a way to pull in the major markets. Now that's an older um, classification, and all of these are created by the Census Bureau and OMB, a couple of government agencies. So we don't make these up. These are all derived by government agencies, but we found that in certain instances, MSA was less than helpful. A lot of our partners can live in and operate in some smaller markets or some exceptions to those major market rules. So we wanted to offer some of the newer and maybe more micro-targeted classifications that those government agencies offer. So that's where CBSA and CSA come into play. And so it's helpful to think of CBSA as the smallest unit for a market. Stands for core-based statistical area, and this can be, as some great examples of this are, Eagle Vale, in the Vail Valley in Colorado, or Durango in Southwest Colorado. Previously, that was lumped into the MSA of Albuquerque, which wasn't very helpful for them. So offering some of these more micro-targeted options really helps you, dial in those very specific queries or reporting. And then the next one is where it might get a little confusing, is multiple CBSAs. So that's sort of the smallest unit can be lumped together into a CSA, which is a combined statistical area. So in a place like Denver Metro, there will be several CBSAs for, the western suburbs, southern suburbs, northern suburbs, and those all roll together into the combined CSA of Denver. Um, so again, just more tools at your disposal for geographical targeting, major markets, and in addition to just the major markets that MSA used to provide, also the ability to now use CBSA in more what we like to call little rural pockets of populations. So I mentioned Durango earlier. Someplace like Bend, Oregon now is its own CBSA and CSA. So just more options for our users based on knowing the vast disparity of geographical options that may be in play. The final one that you may hear mentioned is MUSA, or a micropolitan statistical area, and that's simply a way to describe the size of one of these particular CBSAs, and it's on the smaller side. So that's anywhere between a population of 10 and 50,000. So some of those instances we describe of the Durangos, the Bends, the Sandpoint, Idahos, those would fall into this micropolitan statistical area. Yeah. And so how we would go about using these, obviously it's very situational, based on your needs and where you're targeting. Where we see these new ones, the CBSA or CSA most often pop up, is when we're talking about those smaller or local markets. So how I would use this is for my major markets. I'm probably going to stick with MSA. That's what we've used forever. It's probably well ingrained into your corporate culture. Where I may need to drop down and maybe more micro target using a CBSA is probably in those instances where it's not perfect. Using the old MSA. A great example of this, one of my partners is Purgatory. They're based outside of Durango, Colorado. In the old MSA scheme, they fell into Albuquerque. And so that, as you can imagine, that's maybe less than useful. Albuquerque used to always show up as their number one market because all the Durango locals were falling into there. But now with CBSA, we're able to carve it out. There is a Durango CBSA, and so now we can utilize that when targeting the local market. We've come across this in a couple other places. I mentioned Bend. I mentioned, up in Sandpoint, Idaho for Schweitzer. So it's really going to be situational. CBSA can get very micro focused. MSA is going to be your broad. I like to describe them as like your local TV markets. So think about where your local news comes from if you're still into that, and that'll likely be the MSA. So if
I
we
think you make a good point, Kurt, and just,
yeah,
when Kurt and I were talking before this, trying to define these and make it clear how these all work together is a task you're never going to win. So just focus on the specific situations for your use case, and I think that'll make more
exactly.
sense. Instead of trying to piece this all together and understand the whole picture, focus on your picture, and it'll make a bit more sense.
Cool. So yeah, a good way to walk through this in a real world example. We're in Greg's neck of the woods in Heber City, Utah. So if we were to go into Insight, query a particular city that you may be interested in targeting. So here we have Heber City, Utah. Over in the Fields tab, you could just drop CBSA, CSA, and MSA into there to see the variations. And if you hit execute, this will give a good example. So here we see the CBSA is Heber, Utah. CSA is Salt Lake City, Provo, Orem, and the old MSA is Provo, Orem. And Greg, maybe you could give us a little insight into where Heber is and like why this might make sense.
And you described this well when we were talking earlier, Kurt, how some of these are kind of describing the relationship to places where people go, where they commute to, where they go for maybe sports or those sorts of things. And Heber City is a great example of that, where it's on the Wasatch Back. It's just south of Park City. It's not attached to any like major city, but it doesn't have a lot of stuff there. You can really only shop at Walmart. I think they got a Walmart a few years ago. And so everyone is either driving into Provo Orem to work or to Salt Lake City for sporting events, things like that.
Right.
So hopefully that kind of illustrates that a little bit.
Yeah, and so it sort of gets its own CBSA because it's in that population range of 10 to 50,000 people. But the CSA and MSA is speaking more to the sort of social and economic center that those people might roll up to. So it seems kind of arbitrary when you really dive into these, but OMB and the Census Bureau really do look at things like commuter patterns. Where do people go to work? Where do they go to shop? What is their affinity? I grew up in South Jersey, sort of on the Philly side, and the line where things switch from Philly to New York is very interesting because it's where do people start commuting? Are they going to Philly? Are they going to New York City? Are they Giants fans or Eagles fans? All those things, while seemingly maybe mundane to us, are being factored into these. So it really is affinity to the broader city, the economic impacts where those are flowing, things like that factor into this. So again, just a case of being able to, if you need to micro target and you're utilizing one of these, if you really want to dive into more micro options, CBSA is available, or you can stick with the old MSA or CSA for the more broad market outreach. So yeah, that's the
And
best
you're
way to
looking at
describe
the
it.
results here, Kurt, but once you
Yep,
identify which one you're trying to target, you can go ahead and plug this back into your actual query correct and then be able to drill down that
exactly.
way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the best way to do it. Exactly. And like I said, this is going to be situational as you learn these things. Like my Durango example or my Bend example or Schweitzer. You'll get to know these and you'll dial those in and you could reuse those queries. But initially, there'll be a bit of familiarization process.
So yeah, we can wrap it up there. I think that illustrates the gist of this pretty well. Again, new ways to target people, using List Builder, new ways to identify and group people based on, what you're looking for your unique markets. And if you have any questions, I think this is a perfect situation where if you have questions, talk to your account manager. They can help you dig into the data, figure out the right way to kind of slice and dice this for your unique situation. And any last words, Kurt, or are you good to go?
No, I think we're good to go. You'll also start seeing this incorporated into a lot of our existing reports where MSA was an option for filtering. So we'll be incorporating CBSA and CSA in there as well. So that'll be an option for some of our canned reports. So keep a lookout for those.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.